Welcome to the channel today. We find ourselves in beautiful Outer Banks of North Carolina today, and we're taking the ferry, the Highway 12 ferry, from Hatteras Island to Ocracoke Island today. And as you can see here, this is kind of behind the boat, and if you like to feed seagulls, make sure you always feed the seagulls from the back of the ferry. So we're headed over to Ocracoke Island today. It is about 20 miles from the mainland. It's set in between the Pamlico Sound and the Atlantic Ocean, and it's the southernmost island in the Outer Banks. And most of Ocracoke is part of the Cape Hatteras National Seashore. So a lot of what you'll see when you first get off the ferry is going to be the Hatteras National Seashore like land as you drive through until you get to the town of Ocracoke. And Ocracoke has a lot of great history. It's very beautiful. A lot of with Blackbeard liking to hang out there. It's got a beautiful lighthouse. It's kind of a very unique island. Got a little bit of its own flair, different than the other islands here on the Outer Banks. So we're here, and it is a free ferry. There is another ferry that is to Ocracoke from the Hatteras side. It's an express passenger ferry, but it only allows passengers and cyclists. This one is a car ferry. It also allows you to walk on as people ferry or take your bike if you would like. The passenger ferry does have a fee. As you can see here, I caught one that is fairly empty on the way over. Normally the cars would be packed in here, but it gives you a good view of the deck and kind of how the boat is. See if we can't get a good view here off the bow. So the ferry is fairly unique, and it is a free ferry, which also there are two other ferries leaving from the other side of Ocracoke Island to the mainland, and I believe both of those ferries charge. Ocracoke does not have any bridges to it, so it's either by ferry that you get onto it, or you have to fly. It has a very small airport, though. I mean, it's just a small runway. It's not like there's hangars or anything like that. It's very small. And those are the only two ways, boat or ferry or plane, to get onto the island. Which make it, it's unique. It doesn't have, the town of Ocracoke doesn't have stoplights. It's got a few stop signs. It's kind of a very quaint town, neat shops. And I'll give you here a view. The ferry has got the cars on the bottom here. Then it's got some places to sit here. It also has inside of on the other side of those windows, it's got an air-conditioned place where you can sit and things like that as you go. So the ferry varies in length depending on the dredging for the channel. Right now, I'm thinking it's at least an hour or over. It's a very long ferry ride. And this gives you a little bit of seeing how close they try to pack the cars in, of course, because they're trying to get as many people over and back as possible to leave the shortest wait. So sometimes you will have to wait in line at the ferry, sometimes a very long time, depending on the day, depending on the time of day, depending on where you are in the year. Of course, the tourist season here is summer. If you are trying not to stand in line as long, it is better if you can catch it on a weekend or Monday. And if you can get on the Hatteras side in the morning, the lines will not be as bad. On the Ocracoke side, the evening going back, if you're late enough, it will not be as bad. And we can kind of see here, we're passing another ferry, so you can kind of get to see how the boat looks when you're just looking at it. There are multiple different ferries that are used, and some of them have a little bit different style, but a lot of them are the same basic design here. They do carry 18-wheelers, motorhomes. They do the job for everything. any emergency vehicle or anything like that that has to leave Ocracoke or go to Ocracoke has to go on the ferry. So there is a line at the ferry that is left open to locals and emergency vehicles that will be loaded ahead of time, no matter where you are in the line. So the ferry ride is always an enjoyable ride. It's almost like getting to have your own cruise out here. It's fun to be able to talk to the different people you're riding with. Of course, most of them, if you're in the tourist season, are tourists having a good time just like you, from all over the country. And sometimes you'll get to catch, if you strike up a conversation with somebody, sometimes you get to find somebody from out of the country, which is always fun to hear how they're enjoying our country as they travel through. And if you get to talk to some of the ferry workers, it's fun to hear how the different locals can tell you about the history or the going-ons, which is really neat as well. So pets are allowed, of course, in your vehicle and on leashes on the deck. It is rather warm in the summer on that dark deck, so you might need to watch their paws. So when we get to the other side to Ocracoke, there will not be much other than basically just a ferry dock and then a place for like a restrooms. And then you have to drive about 13 miles into town. There's only one road along the island, and of course, the sound is on one side and the ocean is on the other. So there'll be some beach accesses for the sound or the ocean along the way. They also do have a campground on the island. And of course, there are some motels and restaurants in the village. And I think the beaches are slightly different. I think the sand sometimes is a little finer. Sometimes you might find different shells. I think the water tends to be a little warmer. You are just a little farther south, and though it's not a lot of difference, I think it is a little different. It has its own feel to it. So most of Ocracoke Island is going to be part of the Hatteras National Seashore. Farther to the south, you would hit Portsmouth Island and then Cape Lookout National Seashore. And then, of course, on Hatteras Island, farther up, you have the Hatteras National Seashore. So it is very fun to take the ferry. You never know what you might get to see. You might get to see some dolphins or some of the stingrays swimming off the side. If the water is clear enough, which is not real often, but it does happen sometimes, you might get to see some of the crabs or the other fish or stuff in the bottom, or jellyfish out in the ocean in the sound as you look off. Depending on the route where the ferry takes will depend on the dredging for the year. That also is why it may be different distances and take longer to go. That may vary. You can see here that the channel is decently shallow right off of that buoy, and that's causing the waves there. And that will vary depending on how things go. Sometimes you'll get to see people that are just right off your side that are just like standing in like chest deep water, and the ferry is going not very far from that. You can also see how close there in this time-lapse section that I have, how close the channel was with those buoys there. So sometimes the channel gets very narrow. Sometimes the dredging spot, there's a lot of sandbars right up to the ferry, which causes a kind of neat effect. You can watch the waves and how that affects. And we get another view here of another passing ferry, which is always fun. You can wave to the different people on the boat, which is fun. And every now and then the captains will give a little toot their horns at each other, which is neat. So you are crossing Hatteras Inlet. So you will also see sometimes the different fishing boats going in and out of the inlet, or just people that are heading out for the day out into the ocean to go deep sea fishing. And you can see here we are getting close to the Ocracoke side and just the ferry docks. So they will ask you to, as you load, to get back into your car if you've chosen to get out. And you do not have to get out. You can stay in your vehicle. And you can see here, I'm headed back and I'm taking more of a night ride tonight to kind of show you some of the neat things that can happen at night. I would recommend, if you get to choose your times, that the sunset is amazing on the ferry boat. Out here in the Sound, it's just beautiful to catch a good sunset on the boat. It's always nice to catch a good sunset out here because they have some amazing ones on the Outer Banks. But I'm going to try to get some night footage here and show you some of that as well, because the boat is really fun to ride at night. You get to see the lights. If you're headed towards Hatteras, you get to see the lights of the city as you come in. And of course, there's a few lights looking back at the Ocracoke side. Even though you can't really see the village, you get to see a little bit of the ferry dock there. So we can kind of go up here and we'll see if we can get a look around here. And we'll see if my camera will behave here in the dark. You can see the buoys lights flashing. Yeah, it's having a little trouble here focusing. Let's see if we can make it behave. Here we go. Maybe we'll get it stabilized here. And here's another footage just of the seats and the corridor and the walkway here. So it does, this ferry, of course, as you can notice, it does keep all the ferries on the bottom side deck, and then you have the one floor deck. You can kind of see through the window there some of the seats inside, where passengers can choose to come up and sit on top deck here. So on Ocracoke, there is four-wheel driving on the beach if you choose to. There also is some out here on Hatteras Island on the Cape and things. You will need a permit to do the driving on the beach. So if you want to do that, there is a fee for that as well. And we're still getting a little bit of light from that sun. So it looks like, as commonly they do get out here, you can kind of see that cloud bank along the top, which often does block the sun and getting the best shots of the sunset. But a lot of times you can get some pretty nice cloud color. So some neat facts about some of these boats is a lot of them are actually built in Mobile, Alabama, and then transferred up here, which is a kind of different because you don't exactly think of that, a ferry, being transferred to a spot, but of course they have to be made somewhere and then brought in to do their job. And we'll see if we can get a good footage here of the front. So the way these ferries are, you can they just pull up to the dock kind of lowers, and you just drive on and off. And here we get some of the kind of uniqueness if you're getting the chance to ride the ferry after dark. You get to see sometimes they will use their big spotlight to either look for other boats if they think they're close, or to spot the buoy to mark the channels. And then you get all these seagulls who are coming hoping to get a snack because they're hoping to find the fish that are attracted to the spotlight, which gives you this really neat effect because you just have all these seagulls just flying right alongside your boat, like after dark, which you kind of normally like birds go to roost after dark. So it's a very neat thing. And there's a view of another ferry boat that we're about to pass using their big spotlight. And that's how your ferry looks. Of course, it's headed back to Ocracoke tonight, and it is basically empty because the last ferry does, for the night, does leave at about 12, and you want to catch it if you're not planning on spending the night at Ocracoke Island. So if you like this video, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll see you somewhere along the next adventure.